And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. It's a Mosher Monday edition. That means we go to the mailbag. We answer your Mosher mailbag questions. A lot of them NFC related. We did the segments last week where we looked at NFC contenders. So we asked for questions that were kind of NFC related here. So we'll see what the people came up with on this Mosher Mailbag Monday edition of the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast joined us for a Mosher Monday edition. What's up, Mosher? We are almost 2 weeks. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks to Eagles report day at training camp. Feel the excitement. I know you were in Wildwood this weekend partying it up, but those days are coming to an end soon.
I know. My summer is about to be cut short, but I'm going to make the most of these next 2 weeks.
Make the most of these next 2 weeks because July 22nd, Eagles report, the 23rd, they will be on the field. Before we get into the mailbag questions today, I do want to get a quick thought from you on Bryce Huff, who basically said he knew right away that this wasn't going to work here in Philadelphia. No reporting on that throughout the year. Was like he unhappy or he just like kind of knew that this was like he had instant buyer's remorse, I guess. I guess he liked cashing his check, but he didn't like the fact that he made the decision to come here.
Yeah, it would be Howie who had the buyer's remorse. He had the what? I don't know, the accepting employee's remorse.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure he wasn't upset to go to the bank and cash a check every week. Some of it is probably in his mind. I think I don't want to call it revisionist history, but I'm sure he may have seen some things, some writing on the wall, but there was no reason why you're a pass rusher. You can get the job done, even if the scheme isn't the right fit. It seemed like, I never want to accuse a guy of not giving it all. I don't know, but I don't know that he worked his hardest to try to make it right when he started to see things were wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the signing. It's not to say like, hey, I told you so, but it just seemed like a weird fit. And my point was, look, he might be a really good player, but to live up to what Reddick brought to this team, I thought was going to be a lot for him to kind of try to duplicate that. And he never came close to that. And it just seemed like square peg, round hole almost from the beginning. Like when you saw this signing, though, of Bryce Huff, did you say, hey, smart signing, this is going to be a good fit, or did it seem like a bad fit, right? Because why was it a bad fit?
Right. No, we had questions. I mean, we felt like there were a lot of good metrics about his pass rush win rate that seemed to make sense for what the Eagles like to do. But we also knew that, and we talked about it a lot when they signed him, that he was not a full-time edge rusher. He was for the Jets, he was a DPR, a designated pass rusher. So we really didn't know how his defense would hold up against the run. And, spoiler alert, it was not very good. Nor do we know how he would adjust to sort of playing more of an outside linebacker where you can drop and cover and rush the passer both, as opposed to putting your hand in the dirt. So yeah, we had questions about it. Plus the fact that it was really one breakout year, compared to like other signings that the Eagles have made in the past. But, same thing. You could say the same thing about Reddick. Reddick had two really good years before he came to the Eagles. But you remember his first few years, they used him incorrectly in Arizona.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fit. Sometimes it's want to. It could be a whole lot of different things. But I remember at the time we had some curiosity about it. But I could not have predicted it would have been as terrible as it was.
No, and he just never got into a rhythm. Then he got hurt, and then it seemingly, once he got hurt, that was all she wrote for Bryce Huff. It is a Mosher Mailbag Monday. A lot of questions in the mailbag, so let's get to them today. We're going to start off with Rick in Summers Point wants to know for the Mosher Mailbag Monday, which NFC team in your mind poses the biggest threat to the Eagles this year? Do you go Niners, Lions, Washington, Dallas, or someone else? Rick in Summers Point.
Niners, Lions, Commanders, Cowboys, or someone else. Well, I don't know why. I think we talked about this last week. I feel like I'm on LA Rams Island. I feel like I'm one of the few people who thinks the Rams are a really good team. And I thought that they gave the Eagles the toughest game last year in the playoffs. I don't think that's breaking news to say that. And not only that, I mean, they showed a pretty good resilience just by, it's not like they're a cold weather team, and they came into a snowstorm and gave the Eagles all they had. I've always said I thought their coaching staff is among the best in the league, not just McVay, but the entire coaching staff. And they got Devontae Adams, and they have a really nice young defense. I think they have more gains than losses this offseason, so they're equipped to be better. So I would put the Rams in there among those teams that Rick did not list. And I'd also throw the Packers in there. I think I said to you last week, Mike, if Jordan Love plays like 20% better than he did last year, and he played pretty well last year. They won, 13 games, 12 games, whatever it was. If he plays 20% better, I think that it could be a really dangerous team.
All right, this one's from Joe in Marmora. He wants to know, this one's about the Lions. Are the Lions ready to take the next step after a disappointing loss to Washington? They lost both coordinators, Joe in Marmora.
Yeah, and that's, from a 53-man roster standpoint, when healthy, I think the Lions are the biggest threat to the Eagles from talent to talent. But the loss of both coordinators, I think, is not anything to be underestimated. Both of those guys did an unbelievable job. They're both head coaches. We saw what happened a couple of years ago when the Eagles lost their offensive and defensive coordinator after going to the Super Bowl, right? Took a step back and then had to clean some house to take another step forward. Now, Dan Campbell still there, so he deserves the benefit of the doubt. And they do have a lot of talent. So I expect that the Lions will be a very good team still. But you always wonder about sort of that magic carpet ride that looked like they were headed on until all the injuries derailed them last year. Can they reprise that with two new coordinators?
All right, this one is a question from Joe in Northfield. Has Dallas done enough in the offseason to be a true NFC East contender this season, or more disappointment? They made some good additions, and if healthy, could be interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's not like they had the busiest of off seasons. So to answer the question, have they done enough? On the surface, it doesn't look like that. I mean, obviously getting Pickens from the Steelers was significant. They really needed a wide receiver to put on the outside across from CeeDee Lamb. But they have no running game or at least they don't have what looks like a running game. I mean, Javonte Williams had a really nice rookie year with the Broncos, and he had that really bad knee injury, and he just hasn't been the same. Miles Sanders is a backup. Jadon Blue is a fifth-round pick. It just doesn't feel like, for a team that likes to run and, drafted this run-mauling guard in the first round in Tyler Booker, they don't really, to me, have some kind of weapon in the run game like they used to when they had Ezekiel Elliott or even Tony Pollard. So I don't know that they've done enough offensively to be that much more explosive other than getting George Pickens, which will help. But that's the offensive question mark for them. And on defense, they haven't been able to stop the run since the Truman administration. And I'm not quite sure anything that they've done has made that different. And their new defensive coordinator is Matt Eberflus. And it's not like his teams were always known as being some great run-stopping teams. So until they get that figured out, to me, that'll always be the question mark. But again, they have a lot of blue chip talent. They have Lamb, they have Pickens, they have Dak, they have Micah Parsons. I think Odigi Zua is a really good three technique. I mean, it's not like they don't have,
and their line should be better.
Their offensive line should be better. Now, a lot of that will depend on whether Tyler Guyton takes that big step in year two. If he does, yes, that'll be a very good offensive line.
Which is kind of what their hallmark was when they were. That was when they were good. It's when they had that really good offensive line and Zeke, So,
yep. And then the secondary to me has some question marks. But I think if it's healthy, if Trayvon Diggs can be healthy, and that's a big question mark, and Deron Bland, maybe it's better than it looks.
All right, Mosher Mailbag Monday. Jordan Love and the Packers young core, a better team this year. Feel like they are always overhyped. Chris in North Wildwood.
I think it would be unfair to say they're overhyped. I mean, they were a pretty good team last year. They won double-digit games in maybe the toughest division in all of football, right? The NFC North had three teams that I believe won double-digit games with the Lions and the Vikings. So I think they're a good team. I think we talked about this last week. They had 5 losses, like 3 were by a possession or less. You know what I'm saying? Like 8 points or less. So I think they're good. That's why I say they're the type of team that if they play 20% better than last year, 15, 20% better, they're going to be pretty good.
Well, they got a lot of hype after they won that playoff game 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They beat the Niners in that game. No, they beat Dallas. They beat Dallas.
Yeah.
They lost to the Niners.
Nobody should get that much hype for beating the Cowboys in a playoff game.
Right, exactly. But they got a lot of hype for that was an upset, and then they were like the big team last year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that they didn't live up to. I mean, maybe a little bit Jordan Love because I think people thought he was going to be like the MVP based on how he had played the year before and over the second half. But again, 11-6 is pretty darn good. And then when you have four, I'm looking at their losses right now. 1, 2, 3 losses by 3 or less. 4 actually. That just shows you like bouncing the football one way. It could have been a 14-win team. Yeah, they're good.
They're good. Yeah, they are good. And they went out and got a Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas this year. So that is an addition that Aaron Rodgers never got. They finally went out and got a wide receiver. Sports Bash Mosher Mailbag Monday edition of Football at 4 here. Let's go to Jim in Haddonfield. Which NFC team took the biggest leap in the offseason? Maybe a team we aren't talking enough about.
NFC team that took the biggest leap. It could be the Seahawks without really doing a whole lot, just by having second year of Mike McDonald there, having another draft in the division in the vision of what he wants. Actually, I think again, this is something we talked about. The Cardinals also strike me as a team that could make a jump if some things go their way. I mean, they got Josh Sweat. They were starting to improve as it is last year. They play in a tough division, but they have some games where they're impressive, and others where they remind you that they're the Cardinals. But they were 8-9, and I feel like they are a team. It's between them and the Seahawks. One of those two teams can make a jump, and I will throw this in here. I could see, just based on how Dave Canales was able to get Bryce Young to play quarterback over the second half of last year, maybe the Panthers are one of those surprising teams, because when you talk about a big jump, you gotta be coming from low, right? So the Panthers won 5 games last year. Could they get to 9 or 10 this year? Yeah, I could maybe see that.
That would be very interesting. But you're right. It's like you've been bad, and one of these years it's just like you get the schedule and it just kind of all, I don't know what NFC North's crossover games are, but they do make a big deal when it's like that is a big factor, is where you get that worst to first team is because you got the schedule that kind of just lined up for you. So I like that pick of the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and in the spirit of Jim's question, because he's asking who took the biggest leap by the moves they made in the offseason. I mean, it's hard to not consider the Bears just by getting Ben Johnson, just by, the guys that they drafted in the first round, Colson Loveland, right? I mean, and then they traded for Joe Tooney. They traded for the Rams offensive lineman, Jonah Jackson. So, I mean, the Bears certainly made a ton of both personnel and coaching upgrades to the point where you could see them going from 5 wins to maybe 10 or 11 or 12.
By the way, Carolina plays the NFC West and the AFC East. So they've got a little pocket there of Patriots, Dolphins, Jets, Bills. They play them very early in the year. And then you've got Cardinals, Niners, Rams, and Seahawks in there. So that's their crossover. So that is a tough little group of games there. All right, let's go to Gary and Vineland, who wants to know, do you think Matthew Stafford and the Rams are the one team that can beat the Eagles?
Well, I think there's more than one team that could beat the Eagles. But, going back to our conversation, I think the Rams have a really impressive amount of young talent, but then they've also got some really good veterans in Stafford and Devontae Adams. So, and again, I just think so highly of their coaching staff and their talent development that if they don't turn the ball over, they win. They beat the Eagles. Now the Eagles made those turnovers happen. I'm not trying to take anything credit away from there, but those were huge parts of the game, and it happened. And you don't always get that every single game.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to a couple more here. Geoff Mosher, Monday Mailbag, Jerry in Egg Harbor Township. How big of a wild card are the Bears? Caleb Williams, revamped offense. They got the new head coach there as well. I thought they they added the 2 offensive linemen. Last year it's like they added the skill position players. That didn't work. Then they went the other direction and got some linemen. Hey, good idea.
Yeah. Well, they're a wild card because really I think they've made every move possible in the offseason to put a really competitive team on the field, but we also don't know. We haven't yet seen if Caleb Williams, right, is going to be the franchise quarterback that you want when you draft a guy number 1 overall. So the pieces are all in place, and again, I mentioned the fact that they not only drafted Colston Loveland, but also, Rome Odunze from the year before. They've traded for Tooney and Jackson. They signed Drew Dahlman, a good center. I mean, they've really addressed nearly everything. They signed Grady Jarrett on defense. I forgot about that. That was a good one. They've got a good 53. You would think if this young talent is manifested. They drafted Luther Burden. So I would just say this. I mean, I think that they've got all the pieces in place, but if the quarterback doesn't play like a number 1 pick, then it's not going to matter.
Steven Bridgeton. What's up, Steve? Mosher Mailbag Monday. Which team has too high of expectations in the NFC and won't be as good as we think?
Oh, that's a really good question. Which team has too high of expectations in the NFC and won't be as good as we think?
Couple candidates.
Yeah, I wonder how if the Bucs can keep this thing going after losing their offensive coordinator, what's his name, Liam Cohen, right, to the Jaguars. But I gotta admit, Mayfield's played really well now for a couple of years here, despite having 2 different OCs. So that could be a team. And as much as I've talked about the Rams, they're a team that has a lot of bust potential as well, because if Stafford gets hurt, he's an older guy, Devontae Adams gets hurt. It's not like they're as well balanced offensively. If they have a couple guys regression, you could see that bother in being bad. I just can't see the Lions taking such a huge step back from 15 wins that they only win like 9 games, right? I feel like that's the spirit of the question.
Well, it's like which team? It feels like there's a lot of teams like Tampa, Atlanta, Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco, LA. Like they're all in that like 9 to 11 range, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who's the team that ends up with like 5 or 6 out of that group? Yeah. Minnesota? Maybe Minnesota?
Maybe because they have a new quarterback. But I also feel like expectations are tempered a little bit for Minnesota because of that.
Well, they did win 13 games last year, right? So
right, 14 actually. Yeah. I think maybe the Cardinals, because they've been on the rise. I just mentioned them. They made a lot of moves, but I've never been a huge Kyler Murray guy. So could that team just lose a bunch of games early, get bad morale, a couple injuries, and then wind up only winning 6 games? Absolutely.
All right, let's do a few more here, Geoff Mosher. A Mosher Mailbag Monday edition. Another Stephen Galloway. The biggest Eagles concern, wear and tear from last year's playoff run. There's a wrinkle.
That's an interesting question, Steve. And I would say I don't think that's my overall concern with the Eagles wear and tear, because they have so many young guys stepping into positions, whether it's Nolan Smith or Jalix Hunt or potentially Keely Ringo. I would say that's my biggest concern for Saquon Barkley. When you touch the ball, what was it, 345 times or more than that if you count the playoffs, right? Once you start getting into your touches in that 400 range, it's quite a bit, anywhere between 400 and 500. Remember when the Eagles signed DeMarco Murray coming off that year in Dallas where he had almost 500 touches and he just wasn't the same guy. Now, Saquon's like 300 times the athlete that DeMarco Murray was, but nonetheless, wear and tear on a running back is a real thing. So I do wonder, for his sake, is wear and tear going to be an issue going into 2025?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions I think with the new coordinator is he going to have I don't want to say a lesser version of Saquon, but will he use him less and needing to get more from everybody else? It's like you don't have the same toy that Kellen Moore got to play with.
Right. And it's also probably a fair question for the offensive line, too. I mean, you have Cam Jurgens coming off of back surgery. That's always, for an offensive lineman, not what you want, ideally. Landon Dickerson coming off that injury. And then Lane Johnson has had to deal with some injuries throughout his career, and he's another year older. So I think that would be a fair potential concern.
I'll tell you what, there was another question that came in earlier that we didn't get to, but I can bring it up to you. It says, which NFC team is best built to dethrone the Eagles in 2025? So we can kind of finish up with that one. I think Washington has done a nice job in terms of when you get that quarterback and you get it in like number 2, sometimes the quarterback's pretty good. It's just that he has nothing around them, and then they fail ultimately. The fact that they were that good and they got the quarterback and now have been able to go get Tunsil and Connerly, they avoided that year where you get the quarterback and he gets has a miserable year, which stunts your growth sometimes. I think the fact that they were able to be good, got that experience, and now we're able to go get 2 bookend linemen. I'm intrigued that, when you say best built, Washington is now doing what Philadelphia has. Go get the line. Go get the tackles. They went out and got Debo. I know we're kind of up in the air, but the Eagles had Devontae and nobody else. They went out and got A.J. Brown. They had McLaurin and nobody else. They went out and got Debo. Now, is he A.J. Brown? Probably not, but I think Washington might be getting towards best built.
Yeah, they drafted an offensive lineman, Connerly, in the first round. They drafted the corner in the second round. And I kept thinking, man, the Commanders seem to be making moves that you would ordinarily say the Eagles do this kind of thing too. Sort of high risk, low reward. It's not like they give up a first round pick for Debo Samuel, or Laramie Tunsil. They had a lot of draft stock. I thought they drafted smart. They have offensive line depth for the first time in years because they have a couple of starters and Allegretti and Wiley who may not start now and be top backups. So but from a strategical standpoint also, Mike, I think that the way to try to beat Vic Fangio's defense is to take what the defense gives and move the ball methodically and deliberately, because there's going to be holes and voids in the zones. And the 2 teams that I think that do that really well and have the personnel to do that are the Commanders and the Rams. Especially the Rams with Adams and Nakua. Those guys don't have to catch every ball 20, 30 yards downfield. They're not A.J. Brown, but they are monsters in the intermediate levels and finding those little holes in the void and voids in the zones, and every once in a while being able to churn out little extra yards after the catch. And they have quarterbacks who are fine taking what the defense gives. At least we saw that with Jaden Daniels really early on last year, and then even in the playoffs. So not only are they built personnel-wise, but how they move the ball is probably, as opposed to, say, the Packers, who you can see, Jordan Love loves to take shots. He loves to push the ball downfield, and that hurts him at times because he makes a mistake or holds on to the ball too long or throws a pick.
All right, there you go. It's a Mosher Mailbag Monday. We got more questions we'll get to next Monday here, and we're getting closer. Next Monday will be the 14th, which is also the Home Run Derby. And then the 21st will be the eve of Eagles reporting. So we'll have 2 more Mosher Mailbag Mondays, kind of smorgasbord grab bags, and then we'll get into training camp Mosher Monday questions. And then the season will be here, and we'll recap games on Mondays after the Sunday games. And that's all happening soon right here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Thanks, Moshe.
You got it. Take care, Mike.